There is no net increase in reserves from state land sales unless an investment is made using funds from the sales. Second Minister for Finance Indranee Rajah has made this point in Parliament in response to questions about the relationship between sales of state land, its proceeds and reserves. Ms. Indranee gave an example of how state land is transacted. For instance, the land is sold at fair market value of $1 million. It's then converted from a physical asset to a financial asset. Seen as a conversion of assets, Singapore's reserves don't increase at this point. Now, the $1 million is part of the financial reserves, which is invested for Singaporeans. And at the end of a 99-year lease, the land returns to the state. But when that happens, there is also no net increase in the reserves. And that's as the $1 million received before was meant to make up for the state's loss on the use of the land during the lease period.
There is no net increase in the reserves when state land is first sold and the sale proceeds are transferred to the financial assets. It's just a conversion of one asset form to another. There is no net increase in the reserves when the land returns to the state after the lease expires, as the value of the lease did not include the value of the reversionary interest. There is again no increase in the reserves when the land which was returned to the government is sold again, as before, that is merely a conversion of one form of asset to another. But there is an increase in reserves when the government invests and grows the financial assets. This is the outcome of careful and prudent management of our reserves by this government and should not be taken for granted.
At the same time, Ms. Indranee says that Singaporeans don't make, quote, triple payment for the land that is used for public housing. Nominated MP Leong had asked about the cost incurred in land acquisition. Now, that's from the government buying the land, the Housing Board buying it from the government, and the taxes to cover the shortfall incurred by HDB. Now, to that, Ms. Indranee says when the government buys the land, it compensates the landowner based on fair market value. Now, this is funded from past reserves or government revenues. HDB will then buy the land from the government at a fair market value, as any other buyer of state land would.
Why do we do this? Why don't we simply transfer the land to HDB at zero cost, since it is a transaction between government and a government agency? The reason is because the transfer to HDB for developing public housing results in the land being taken out of the past reserves. If fair market value is not paid in exchange for the land, the past reserves will be depleted. There would be no corresponding financial asset to replace the physical asset, and no land sales proceeds to invest and generate returns for use in the form of the NIRC.
Ms. Indranee says that when HDB sells flats to Singaporeans, they do so at a discount, such as subsidies or grants from fair market value. This, she says, is to keep flat prices affordable.
The difference between the fair market value and HDB's posted price is the market subsidy. In addition, the government provides generous grants to eligible applicants to purchase flats below HDB's posted price. Because of these grants and subsidies, HDB's effective selling price is typically much lower than the total cost of development, which results in a revenue shortfall. This shortfall is covered by a government grant to HDB, which is funded by NIRC and taxes, which are paid not only by Singaporeans, but also by PRs, foreigners working and living in Singapore, tourists and companies, and other tax-paying entities.
And it's the affordability of flats that Ms. Indranee says matters to Singaporeans over, say, the cost breakdown of developing new flats. Now, she says making the information public would not be meaningful. Leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, had asked for the breakdown as well as the value of the subsidies applied to all new flats.
Should we give the total development cost? The answer is that we don't think that anything would be achieved by doing so. And the reason is this. What is the real important thing to Singaporeans? The real important thing is, are you able to afford the flat? And what the government does is it takes the market value, which people will know when you know any particular area, you ask any valuer, they'll be able to give you a general value. And you look at the selling price and the grants, and every Singaporean who buys a BTO knows that actually the price that they are paying is less than what you would have to pay if you were paying at pure market price. That's why BTOs are so popular. Otherwise, you would buy resale. And then what happens to the government is at the end of the day, in almost all cases, we have a net loss. So different places will have different pricing and different subsidies. So Mr. Singh's question was, provide a breakdown of cost of all new flats henceforth. It's not meaningful, because you will be just comparing this one with this one, and prices in one area may not be the same as the other.
So let me suggest why it perhaps could be meaningful. Since the introduction of the prime location housing of PLH flats last year, it suggests to me at least, or provides an example why a detailed publication of HDB subsidies are actually warranted. A HDB PLH flat buyer, upon selling his PLH flat after a 10-year MOP, will have to return the quantum of additional subsidies provided as a percentage of the original assessed market value of the flat. And the subsidy recovery will apply to the resale price that is a reflection of the prevailing market value, regardless if the flat is sold at a gain or a loss. Another reason I would suggest to the Minister to publish the dollar value of the subsidy is to scrutinize and track the amount of subsidies being diverted for home ownership purposes. This is particularly in view of the Ministry of National Development's 2011 decision to de-link BTO prices from the rising resale market then. The median price of a four-room and larger HDB resale flats has increased 26% between 2017 and 2022. With resale prices reaching record highs today and therefore pushing up the market price of land, increasing the size of the subsidies under the current HDB policy would appear to be the main way through which BTO prices will be kept affordable.
Prime location housing, it actually doesn't really change my answer, because at the end of the day, the question is what is affordable to the person who's buying. And we have made no secret of the fact that for prime location housing, you will have to have a greater subsidy. So that's the key thing. So it comes back to the same question, which why would you have to disclose or put out the development cost of every single project? It's just not meaningful. The key thing is to the buyer, is this affordable? And that's what HDB does.
Singapore is studying a suggestion for homeowners to sell their public housing flats if they buy a private property. As among the ideas gathered from the nationwide engagement exercise Forward Singapore. Currently, public housing owners may buy a private home if they hold on to their flat for at least 5 years. The Housing Board says about 3% of flat owners have at least one private residential property. Around 45% of this group of people do not live in their HDB flats as they rent them out. The National Development Minister says the trend has remained stable over the last 3 years. One opposition MP says more can be done to free up public flats for Singaporeans.
So resale flat prices have gone up about 28% in the last 2 years. And this year alone, between January and September, more than 266 flats sold for over $1 million. So this has put resale flats beyond the reach of many Singaporeans, even after factoring in the generous government grants. So the purpose of my question was to discuss ways to moderate resale flat prices so they are more affordable for lower and middle income Singaporeans. And one way to increase this is to achieve this is to increase the supply of resale flats.
We're also mindful of macroeconomic conditions going forward, rising interest rates, uncertainty in the economic climate globally, people being more prudent in their home purchases. So those will also have an impact, and we will need to monitor the market carefully. We will act decisively but carefully to ensure that the property market remains in line with economic fundamentals.
Fines of up to 50,000 Singapore dollars. Now, that's a tenfold increase for all unauthorized activities on state land. It's part of the new bill introduced to protect state land, which also proposes that more powers be given to enforcement officers. The Singapore Land Authority says it sees an average of 180 encroachment cases every year. Examples of encroachment include building or putting up makeshift structures like awnings, illegal dumping and planting on state land. One case involved a couple who were fined $7,000 last year. They had built a metal gate, a fence and 2 boundary walls on state land at Jalan Tari Zapan in Seletar. The structures have since been demolished. They were asked to remove these structures when a drainage improvement project started in the estate in 2013. The new bill also proposes that for repeat offences of illegal dumping using a vehicle, a maximum fine of up to $100,000 and 12 months jail be imposed. Offenders may also be ordered to pay for damages incurred by the government. These include costs and expenses to clear the objects. If passed, it will also be an offence to park vehicles on state land. The bill will also give officers the power to enter and inspect any land without warrant. If there's reason to believe an offence has been committed, they can also issue notices to stop unlawful activity on state land without having to apply to the court to do so. The new State Lands Protection Bill will replace the existing State Lands Encroachments Act, which was last reviewed in 1974.